Okay, I'm going to do this video about how to be happy, and I'm not saying I'm the happiest person in the world. It's really arguably the opposite. I'm like naturally not that happy about stuff, but if I think about how to be happy, then that helps. And I I think it's worth talking about like what happiness actually is and how to get into that state, or at least as close as you can to it, right? So, I mean, think about how sophisticated the reward system of a human brain has to be, how it had to evolve to act as a catalyst to make people do stuff that was relevant both for themselves and for the society that they live in, right? The way that the human brain defines what is happiness and what is long-term happiness, what is reward, what is depression and is not depression, that stuff is a matter of life and death for the human being and for the society that the human lives in. So just to give an example, if you were happy about everything all the time, you probably wouldn't really accomplish that much because you'd just kind of be randomly going through life in this state of happiness, whether you ate enough to stay alive or drank enough to stay alive, or whether you interacted with people or not, or whatever. It wouldn't matter because you'd just be happy all the time, right? So the idea of happiness, short-term and long-term, like in terms of both pleasure and fulfillment with career and all that stuff, it's basically nature imposing guidelines on a human being's behavior that kind of pushes them into a state where they're benefiting themselves and the society that they live in, right? So if you're thinking about how to be happy, you got to keep track of a few different things. You got to kind of stay inside the rails in a few different ways. And I've gone to extremes. There's been parts of my life where I just focus on like super long-term goals. Like I want to accomplish some scientific project and I don't care. At least in theory, I didn't want to care about anything that happened in my life from day to day. I just wanted to focus on doing whatever was necessary to accomplish that project, right? And then there's been other times when I've said, well, the overall project of life is completely irrelevant because everything's going to end in the heat death of the universe anyways, and all you've got is the moment that you're in, like that very second that you're experiencing, even less than a second. That's the most important thing, so you just got to make that good, right? So maybe it's just a matter of those sensations, like with food and feelings and stuff, that you're just feeling in the moment. Maybe those are the only things that matter. Well, it turns out, if nature lets you get away with either one of those, it would be suboptimal. So nature doesn't really do that. It doesn't let that be happiness. Neither one of those extremes is really happiness, right? In other words, just eating ice cream, nature's not going to allow you to just be happy all the time just by eating ice cream, assuming that you like the taste of ice cream, right? And also, nature's not going to allow you to be happy if you kind of give up all the simple pleasures to try to accomplish some super overarching goal, right? Because basically all those smaller pleasures are things that nature feels are generally important and need to be maintained, right? So common things that cause those pleasures are like eating something that tastes good, or talking to your friends in a fun way and making jokes, or having sex, right? Those all cause measurable changes, like spikes in brain's happiness state, right? And the reason nature set those up is because it's saying basically if you're going through life and you're doing these things, you're probably on the right course. And your brain doesn't really understand modern society. It doesn't even know what the truly correct answer is. But it's trying to keep you on track. And if you completely ignore, either side of this, if you ignore either the short-term pleasures or the long-term goals, ultimately some part of your brain kind of figures that out and will punish you, right? So if you want to achieve happiness, that's why you've got to like maintain both of these things. And you've got to think, even if you've gotten to a point where you only want to accomplish a long-term goal, or if you only want this sort of short-term pleasure. The fact is your brain's not really going to let you get away with that. So you've got to find some balance, and you kind of master both of those things simultaneously as best you can. And that's how you can kind of stay within the rails of happiness, because there really is no accomplishment. I mean, this is going to, I'm not being negative about this, but I'm just saying there's no accomplishment that really matters, right? There's no way to prove that humanity actually matters that much, or that you matter, or whatever. We're atoms bouncing around. And, the human species that could be here or not wouldn't necessarily matter from any universal standpoint. There's no way to prove that it would. But the fact is, regardless of all that stuff, and I'm not saying humans are, I'm not saying humanity is valuable or that it's not valuable. I'm just saying, it's hard to prove anything either way. But the fact is, we really do have these guidelines that evolve that define happiness. So if you just kind of stay within the guidelines, or you find how those guidelines arrange, or you find how to maximize that for your life and for your brain, then at least you can achieve happiness. And it turns out that things are set up so that you can do cool stuff while you're achieving happiness, right? I mean, one of the shortcuts, I guess, is to use drugs, and I don't use that kind of drugs very much to even experiment with it. But I mean, people take shortcuts that actually gets them to happiness without them accomplishing anything. But let's say if you don't take drugs, right, and you actually figure out a way to achieve happiness, then automatically your brain has this structure in place so that you will automatically be accomplishing interesting stuff and benefiting your own, your health and your survival, and the health of your society and its survival, because that's kind of what your brain wants you ultimately to do. So, figuring out how to be happy and following that guideline, keeping things balanced, it's probably a good thing, and something to think about, especially, if you're like me and being happy doesn't really come naturally. You actually have to logically think about how to be happy and what you need to do. Anyway, that's my comment, and thanks.